Spartacus, the Thracian gladiator who led a slave uprising against the Roman Republic, is a historical figure whose life has inspired countless books, movies, and TV shows. The most famous depiction is arguably the 1960 film, Spartacus, directed by Stanley Kubrick and starring Kirk Douglas. In that film, several lines have become iconic, although these quotes are not directly attributed to the historical Spartacus as there is limited documentation on his actual words. Here are some memorable quotes from the film. "I'm Spartacus." This line is shouted by multiple slaves to protect the real Spartacus from identification and capture. It has become a symbol of solidarity and resistance. When a free man dies, he loses the pleasure of life. A slave loses his pain. Death is the only freedom a slave knows. That's why he's not afraid of it. That's why we'll win. A line that speaks to the desperation and resolve of the slaves in their revolt. "I am not an animal." Spartacus yells this line to assert his humanity in the face of dehumanizing treatment. If we're ever to be a nation of free men, we must first have laws. A quote that reflects the ideals Spartacus and his followers were fighting for. "I would rather be here, a free man among brothers, facing a long march and a hard fight, than the richest citizen in Rome, fat with food he didn't work for and surrounded by slaves." This line encapsulates Spartacus's disdain for the Roman way of life, especially its dependency on slavery. Remember that these quotes are from the movie and should not be considered as historical utterances from the real Spartacus, about whom very little is definitively known. Nonetheless, they capture the spirit of resistance and freedom that has made the story of Spartacus enduringly popular. In the heart of ancient Rome, a power that stretched from the arid deserts of Africa to the misty realms of Britannia, a legend was born. A gladiator, a rebel, a leader. His name? Spartacus. But before his name was whispered, shouted, and then roared across the lands, he was just a man, a Thracian warrior with dreams as wide as the sky. Imagine the dust and dirt flying under the hooves of Thracian horses. Spartacus, a fierce warrior in his own right, fighting for his homeland. Could he have ever foreseen the twisted path fate had laid before him? Not likely, for the life of a gladiator was never one he aspired to. Yet, as often happens in tumultuous times, war betrayed him. He was sold into slavery, ripped from the pages of his own story and thrust into a nightmare penned by Roman hands. Can you hear the clashing of swords and the roars from the Colosseum? That is where our hero found himself next, a gladiator school in Capua. For most men, this would be a death sentence, the final chapter in an insignificant life. But not for Spartacus. Even in chains, he refused to bow. Even when pitted against his fellow slaves in battles to the death, his eyes never lost their fire. He was a gladiator, yes, but in his heart, he remained a free Thracian, a fact that Rome would soon regret. What happens when you corner a wolf? It fights back, and so did Spartacus. Along with 70 or so fellow gladiators, he orchestrated a daring escape, seizing weapons and armor and painting the walls of their prison in the blood of their captors. But freedom, as they soon found out, had its own price. Now outlaws, with the Roman legions closing in, a choice presented itself. A choice that would turn the escaped slave into a legend. Imagine you're there, standing at a crossroads in a dark forest. Spartacus, now the undeniable leader of this motley crew of gladiators and runaway slaves, had to make a monumental decision. Disperse and run, melting back into the bonds of slavery, or worse? Or unite and fight, forge an army from the chains that once bound them? The air was thick with anticipation, each breath a question, each glance a challenge. Spartacus chose to fight. The slave army grew, from hundreds to thousands. Farmers, shepherds, and former soldiers broke their chains and flocked to his banner. Rome had never faced a slave uprising of this scale, and they were unprepared for Spartacus' tactical brilliance. Victory followed victory. Encampments turned into fortresses, and the slave army began to dream the impossible dream. defeat Rome and end slavery. But as the gears of fate ground onward, Rome's pride swelled into wrath. The Senate dispatched its legions, commanded by the wealthiest and most cunning generals, to quash the Spartacus-led rebellion. Skirmishes turned into battles, battles into full-blown wars. For every inch of freedom, Spartacus and his army paid in miles of blood. Will Spartacus find the freedom he so fiercely fought for, or will the might of Rome prove too overpowering? What legacy will he leave behind, in sand and stone, in history and hearts? In the annals of time, amid countless tales of heroes and villains, conquerors and kings, the story of Spartacus stands as a beacon, a tale not just of a slave, but of a man who defied an empire. And the world, even 2 millennia later, has never quite forgotten that defiant cry for freedom. So, dare to know, dare to delve, dare to whisper his name. Spartacus. So if you're feeling inspired, you know what to do. Hit that like button, share this video, and come join our tribe of history buffs and wisdom seekers. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.